The Black Widow is one of the greatest stories there is. So anytime somebody can jump on that, they're going to jump.
I don't even know if someone could sit down and make this story up. If they just put pen to paper, I don't even think you could write in all the twists and turns that are Betty Newmar's life.
It's too much happened to her not be guilty of something. It's too much. It's not just coincidental.
5 men, 5 marriages, 5 loves, 5 deaths. Is this the worst stroke of luck ever for one woman who ever existed?
She's not evil. She's demon-possessed. She is.
The big question here is this coincidence or is this crime?
This is Betty Newmar, a grandmother from Georgia who has suddenly been thrust into the media spotlight.
76-year-old Betty Newmar has lived a long life, and for 22 years, investigators believe she may have gotten away with murder.
In May 2008, Betty Newmar was arrested for soliciting the murder of her husband, Harold Gentry.
A murder that happened nearly 22 years ago when Betty Newmar was then known as Betty Gentry. Investigators found her husband's body inside their North Carolina home. Harold Gentry had been shot several times.
He was shot to death inside his house, and it was a brutal murder. I mean, he was shot several times, and his body was just left there, and it was discovered the next day. It was a hit.
He was killed on Sunday, and on Monday nights when he was found. And he was swelled pretty bad. And if they hadn't told me who he was, I wouldn't have known.
The case of the alleged Black Widow continues to unravel.
Within weeks, this local news story had turned into a media frenzy after it emerged that Betty had been married 5 times, and all 5 husbands had died suspiciously. Could this little old lady really be a serial killer? I set off to America to make a film about Betty, to find out if she really is the Black Widow or the innocent victim of a sensation-hungry media.
It reads better than any soap opera or book you could ever put together. It is a story that is so utterly unbelievable that if you read it and someone told you it was true, you wouldn't believe it.
It's Black Widow's story on steroids. I mean, when you think about it, with all the twists and turns and the deception, usually when you think of a Black Widow story, it's not a Black Widow story that's taken place over 50 years. I think what got me interested in this case was the fact that Al Gentry spent 22 years of his life trying to pursue justice for his brother's death.
It's been almost 23 years of hell. And they said it was a heaven and hell, and I believe I've lived in hell right here on earth for the last 23 years. Because I saw him. And he looked like he might have weighed 300 pounds. He was swelled so bad. I wouldn't have known who he was. And since then, I looked at him then, I said, there's nobody going to get by with this. One of these days, somebody's going to jail for it. And I promise you, I'll find them some way or another. And so far, I've kept my promise.
When Al said he'd been pursuing the case for 22 years, he meant he pursued the case for 22 years. He would show up at the sheriff's department several times a month. His wife, Diane, told me that there would be many nights where they would head out to dinner and they would drive towards the restaurant when all of a sudden he would just say, you know what, I'm going down to the sheriff's office. This was a case that consumed him.
Let's just say he's been obsessed with it, with getting something done, and aggravated that no one wanted to help him get anything done. Every time we went to Albemarle, if he took that certain road that led toward the sheriff's department, I knew that's where we were going. And it was very often that he went.
I learned that he walked in the door. As he entered the door, he was shot in the back of the head, and he had 4 shots in his back with a .38 or a .357. And they don't know which because both of them carry the same granule lead.
Alice told me that the night after his brother was murdered, he went to his brother's house because he was called by the police. And he was standing outside, and there were police sirens and, police cars with the flashing lights. And Betty had showed up at the house. And while he didn't like Betty, they had their disagreements over the years, he didn't think she had anything to do with her brother's murder. But when she got out of the car and walked towards him, the first words out of her mouth were, "Al, I want you to know that I was in Augusta, Georgia last night. I had nothing to do with Harold's death."
When she says, "I was in Augusta," from that moment, I knew she was involved. From that moment on, I knew she was involved somewhere. Even if I had done it, I'd have been very upset. I would have been wondering who would have done it, why would have done it, make them think that I hadn't had nothing to do with it. But when you come up with just plain blank and say, "I wasn't in town, I was in Augusta," that's when the bells goes off my head thinking, well, she may have had something to do with it.
Did you pass your suspicions on to the sheriff?
Oh, yes. Bunches of times. Bunches. Every time I go in there. Every one of them's told me that they've had somebody working on this case. And every one of them told me a damn lie.
My dad was my hero, but I was always very close to both my parents. I had high school friends that thought my parents were the coolest parents, because my mom and dad would always get out and do stuff with us and, stuff like that. The biggest thing I can say about her is she's always been there, not only for our family, but there's been strangers that she's helped for no reason except they need help. The sheriff's department, they came to her and told her she was not a suspect at that time, that, everything, she had been investigated, and there was nothing there. So, and all the other leads that they had, basically, from what I was told then, were cold.
So why, Al, after 21 years, is the case reopened?
Because I kept pursuing it. I pursued it for 21 years with 4 sheriffs till Rick Burris come in as sheriff.
One of the things from talking to Al was he never understood why none of the sheriffs ever, arrested her or charged her with anything. He reached a point in his life after almost 22 years of doing this that he had a case file of evidence and witnesses and people he had talked to. And then there was a new sheriff who was elected. His name was Rick Burris. And it was Rick's first day on the job. And so he took this thick file with statements and witnesses, and he waited for Rick to show up his first day in the office.
When he found the files, he said, I looked at it, and he said, I looked about 3 minutes. He said, I called the DA's office. He looked at it about 3 minutes and said, we need an arrest on this as soon as possible. They started August the 7th. And they come here around the 1st of May of last year, of 08. And they come to the door. And when I seen where they were from, I come apart. Because I knew what he was here for. Every time I try to tell that, I cry. They took a case that hasn't been looked at. It hadn't been looked at since '87. I mean, it was very cold. And they dug and dug and dug. I said, you got a new excavator and you are digging some ground, boy. You are digging up more stuff than I could have ever thought of. And he said, well, it's going to be an arrest soon. This was on Wednesday, and the following Wednesday, I think, is when they arrested her.
News 12 was the only TV station in the hearing as Betty Newmar heard those charges. Crime Team 12's Lindsay Gardner takes us inside.
Until now, it's been a cold case. North Carolina investigators say new evidence shows the trigger was pulled because Betty ordered it. 2 people have come forward to say that Betty asked them to take care of Harold Gentry. We have crime in Augusta like any other city, but it's not every day that you hear about a 76-year-old woman being arrested while she's out in her yard gardening and now being charged with conspiracy to commit murder. That's exactly what happened with Betty Newmar. We got our first look at Betty in jail, shackled and cuffed. For Betty, it was supposed to be an extradition hearing. We kind of just sat back, and they open up the door, and you hear all the other inmates sitting in there start screaming as soon as the door opens. Girl, you're going to be on front page. You're going to be front page news.
Girl, you're going to be front page.
And here comes this 76-year-old woman who could be your grandmother or your next-door neighbor's grandmother in an orange jumpsuit, shackled and cuffed, walking across to this little room. And Betty comes in, and she just puts her hands up.
You know, the news showed her walking along with bracelets on, and then she had that orange outfit on. I said, that woman always dressed neat, always had her fancy jewelry. And I said, but she had the prettiest outfit on I've ever seen her wear. And them stainless steel bracelets. I mean, that is some of the best jewelry I've ever seen.
She's charged with solicitation, which is basically trying to hire somebody to kill her husband. You know, in the scheme of things, I'm not making light of the case because obviously it's significant in the fact that someone was killed and whatnot, but in the scheme of things as far as time and punishment, it is not a huge case, so to speak. It's completely been a little bit unfair at this point in time in the way she's been portrayed in the media, especially given the fact that there have been no charges, so to speak, anywhere else, any other jurisdictions other than here, and the way the media has been portrayed, and the general public would be under the impression that she has been charged with murder in these other jurisdictions, and that's the farthest thing from the truth. She hadn't even been charged with murder here.
As I delved further into the story, it became clear that no hitman had actually been arrested for Harold Gentry's murder. Yet Betty's arrest prompted the media to suggest that she'd got away with not just one, but 5 murders.
The 76-year-old wed 5 times in her life, her first in Ohio in 1950 to Clarence Malone. But within a year, Betty reported abuse, and in 1952, the couple divorced after having a son.
What I know about Betty's background is that she was born in a shack in West Virginia. She went to a local high school, and as soon as she graduated, she married a guy by the name of Clarence Malone that she met in high school. He was an auto mechanic. In 1951, shortly after they'd been married, she'd actually filed a domestic violence complaint against Clarence Malone, saying that she was, quote, molested. At some point, Clarence Malone spends some time in a little town called Medina, and he got married again, and in 1970, he's found shot to death. And the police in Medina rule it a homicide, and to this day, it's an unsolved homicide.
Husband number 2, James Flynn, shot to death in New York in 1955. Investigators say Betty was there.
Husband number 2 is James Flynn. At some point, she meets James Flynn after she leaves Clarence Malone. And she had a daughter, Peggy, by this James Flynn.
I think that she has been a caring, loving mother, and she's a loving, caring grandmother. And I think that she was dealt a bad hand.
James Flynn left Betty and her children when his daughter Peggy was just a little girl.
I don't remember a lot about him because I was little. I mean, I've seen pictures like of our first Easter and stuff like that, and I still have my first Easter outfit out there. But other than that, I can't remember a lot.
How old were you when he joined?
I don't know.
Were you told about his death?
My grandmother had said something to me that if I knew that he'd passed away, and I said no.
So that's the first you knew?
Yes, sir.
We believe that James Flynn died in New York on a pier in 1954. She told police that he was found shot to death, and she's told other stories about what happened to him, but we don't know for sure.
Husband number 3 supposedly killed himself in 1965 in Florida, but since investigators ruled it a suicide, they destroyed Richard Sills' records.
Husband number 3 is Richard Sills. Richard Sills was in the Navy, and at some point in the 1960s, they meet. They get married, and in July of 1965, he's found shot to death in the bedroom of their home.
I mean, I heard the shot. Yes, sir.
I didn't know that. Were you around at the time?
Yes, sir. I was in the trailer.
Can you describe it for me?
None of him and Mom was just arguing, and then I heard a shot, and then the police or the medics and all came, and he was laying on the bed, and he went to snorting, And he rolled off the bed, and I asked the paramedic if he was dead, and they said to get me out of there. And that's all I remember.
And how old were you?
11. But he drank quite a bit. He drank vodka.
What, me?
The interesting thing is that the police really didn't do a thorough investigation. They left it up to NCIS, which is the Navy's investigative, agency to really look into it. And they ruled that it was a suicide, but yet there's enough questions there to believe that it was probably a murder. They never did an autopsy, but the medical examiner with NCIS says it appears that he'd been shot twice, once in the heart and once in the liver. One of the things that experts tell you is that when somebody tries to commit suicide or commits suicide, they usually don't shoot themselves twice, and usually the most common way for a man to kill himself is by putting a gun in his mouth or to his temple. So there are some things here that are suspicious.
The District Attorney's Office in North Carolina asked the Florida Police Department to reinvestigate the death of Richard Sills. I managed to get a copy of their report and showed it to Richard's son, Michael.
He had passed away when I was 12 or 13, and he left my mom when I was about 8. Military had come to the home and told us, that he had passed away. Supposedly he had committed suicide. And that's the way I've left it for the last 44 years, until now. From what I'm looking at right here, these are the Florida police reports into my dad's death and what possibly might have happened. According to this, they're saying it's possible that there have been 2 gunshot wounds. Not a single shot to the chest like was, noted. They said they would like to exhume the body, but for it to happen, I don't know. And like I say, if they could get this Betty Newmar to spill her guts or something in jail, to a jail informant or something, or even somebody that might be in there, that would be a big help to find out whether, if she slips and lets loose and says that, she had killed her husband. I don't even have a picture of my dad. I have nothing that belonged to him. And the other part that bothers me the most is where he's buried. I don't know about that. I don't even know if he has a headstone or anything. He's a veteran of this country. I want to make sure that he got his funeral rights as a veteran. What happened to my dad? What I'd like to know. Did she rob me at the time that I could have got to know my dad? We won't know that until we have this resolved. But if she has robbed me that time, then as much as I hate to say it, she needs to be robbed at her time. If she's proven guilty, she deserves everything she gets. And I'm still an old firm believer in the death penalty. The only thing I don't care for is this time they make them sit and wait and wait and wait. If they can prove DNA and everything else prove that you are guilty, there shouldn't be no waiting period. They should march you in just like they did in the old days. Done with you. I carry a gun for protection because the DA told me I needed protection because my life had been threatened. And the other week, this guy was stopped out here in front of the house and was taking pictures. He went up here and went down a driveway, went down and turned around. I mean, he must have flew because he come back up that hill and he stopped out down there, and I grab my gun and I go back down there and I catch him sitting there at the end of the road. I asked him, what is he doing, taking pictures at my house? He said, where's your house? I said, it takes an idiot not to know where he's taking pictures at. Now, what the hell are you doing taking pictures of my house? He said, well, I was just taking pictures of that little T-model out there, and I'm not going to say the words that I told him. I said, I've got a problem. I said, I've got a target on me. Somebody has wanted me dead. And I said, I have to carry a gun. And something stupid like what you just did I said, if you wanted to take some pictures, you stop and ask me.
So why would Betty want Alfio? What she gained?
Because he started all this. He's the reason she landed in jail. Because he persisted for 22 years to get her arrested for this. That's why she thoroughly hates his guts.
It's taking a toll on me. It's taking a bad. To tell you the truth about it, I've held it a lot. I've held a lot in me for a long time. It's kind of hard to hold something that long, especially when you ain't getting no help. I told you, boy, I'd get her. And maybe we have. I sure as hell hope so. A lot more people on our side now than there used to be.
That's right.
I hope they nail her so bad it's unreal.
Well, maybe they will, honey.
I think she was involved in a drug deal with a drug dealer, dealing drugs from Florida. And Harold found out about it. She had went to Florida and stayed about 3 or 4 months. And he started seeing this lady. He was going to leave her. And she found out about it. He told her he'd about give him 2 weeks and I'll be out of here. He didn't live 2 weeks. He was dead. She had him killed because she was mad at him because of the woman, and the drug dealer and her got together and had him killed simply because he knew too much.
Al Gentry may well think that, and there might well have been another woman in his brother's life. But despite all the rumours surrounding Betty, Al was the only person to mention drug dealing.
The case of the alleged Black Widow continues to unravel, and tonight, News 12 has new information on the 5-state investigation into Betty Newmar.
I didn't think his death was suspicious at first.
John Newmar's dad, John, was married to Betty 14 years. They're seen here in an interview with News 12 in 1997. John died this past October, and at the time, his son believed what he was told. It was by natural causes.
After the death of husband number 4, Harold Gentry, she moves to Augusta, Georgia, where she had made contacts over the years. And she ran a beauty shop down there. And a friend of John Newmar's said, you know what? I get my hair cut. At the time, her name was Betty Gentry, at Betty Gentry's beauty shop. And I think she would be a perfect match for you, John. Why don't you go in there and get your hair cut and see what you think? And basically, his friend set him up. Betty was charming, he was lonely, and they started a romantic relationship. And I believe within a year of that first haircut, they were married.
When we were growing up, he was always a good family man, took care of his family and everything, and we did a lot of things together. Then after my mother passed away and, he met Betty, everything just seemed to change pretty rapidly.
For the first couple of times, I just thought it was somebody that my father was seeing. I didn't think it was going to, wind up in a marriage or anything like that, but in fact, when he broke it to me, I was totally stunned. When he did call, he said, "Are you sitting down?" And at the time I was, and he said, "Well, what are you doing for a wedding next week?" I said, "Well, I was sitting down, but not that low." And then it was a done deal. They were married in 1991.
When they got married, I did my best to keep a relationship with him, but you could tell very quickly that a wedge was just drove between the families, that we were not welcome over there. It come to the point where I felt so cold when I went in that house that I could not bring myself to go back over there anymore.
My husband has laid in there in our bed night after night crying because he didn't understand what was going on between him and his dad. This is his dad, and he would say to me, he'd say, "Baby, what have I done? What did I do? What can I do to make things right between me and my dad?" You couldn't go visit. You couldn't call him. You couldn't anything. She made sure.
In about 2007, John Newmar became very sick. He had sepsis, and he was tired, and his body was just kind of breaking down.
He was a very healthy man, never sick a day in his life. I've never known him to have a cold until after he got married to her, and then he seemed to start having physical problems.
I know he was getting up there in years and that sort of thing, but it seemed like he deteriorated so quickly.
He died, and she didn't even bother to call his son. My husband is the only son he had. Didn't call him and say, your dad passed away.
I was sitting there reading the newspaper at work and read his obituary and find out he's dead, and then when I go to check on him, she already had him cremated. I mean, it's just strange. Why do you do that? You don't even call up and consult. You know, your daddy said he wanted to be, I don't think my daddy ever said he wanted to be cremated.
Mr. Newmar had bought a cemetery, a double plot in North Augusta, when the first Miss Newmar, Virginia, passed away. And he fully intended to be buried next to her. He did not intend to be cremated. He was Catholic.
Investigators finally caught up with Betty Newmar at her Augusta home, and they hope a lifetime of evidence was also inside.
Now, what happened with the Georgia police was after the North Carolina police decided to reopen the case and investigate the death of husband number 4, they contacted Georgia police and said, look, you might want to relook at John Newmar's death.
After Mr. Gentry had got the authorities in North Carolina, their suspicions aroused. They did come down here to her home. They went through her house and picked up certain items and took them. Among the things that they took was a number of poisons.
Chemicals like Roundup and rat bait poison, an unknown metal powder, and also an empty 5-pound bottle of carbon tetrachloride, a chemical so dangerous, prolonged exposure leads to a coma or even death.
Mr. Newmar's ashes were sent to a forensic scientist who tested them, and his conclusion was that he couldn't detect anything because of the nature of Mr. Newmar's illness. The medications that they had given him would test positive for poisoning regardless of whether or not there was.
You think she may have killed him?
Oh, I have my suspicions. Because it's just, you can't prove nothing without any evidence, but it still seems mighty funny, with the history of her past and everything, what you hear about, and then, like, say, the way he changed, and all of a sudden she just has him cremated and didn't want us to even know he's sick or anything like that. He was worth some money, too. When he married, he had a house that was paid for, a couple of cars that was paid for, a retirement plan, which I never saw none of that, So I have my reasonable doubts.
Do you think she killed your father?
I don't think she'd try to stop anything. But it wouldn't surprise me if she finagled something.
If she had any decency at all in her, she would have gave me my father's ashes so I could bury him next to my mother. But she has no decency in her. And, a lot of people ask me, they say, well, do you hope she gets found guilty on one of these charges or something? I don't care if they ever find her guilty, because you know what? One day she's going to have to meet her maker, and she's going to regret everything she's ever done.
All I'd like is for her to come and say, here, take his ashes. She doesn't want those. That's all John and I want, is just to have his ashes back. And to put him where he really belongs with my mom.
Have you asked for them back?
I haven't talked to her. I wouldn't dare, because I know I would totally be out of control.
There's no proof that she murdered your dad or any of the other victims, but when you stop and begin to put things together, especially when you come over here to the cemetery and you see where your dad wanted to be buried, you begin to realize that there was more to this than he just died because he was sick. The fact that you read of your dad's death in the paper, and the fact that she separated the family and wouldn't let y'all be a family, you begin to realize there's more to it than what meets the eye. You know she did it. You know she did.
And even in his time of death, she wouldn't let him come home.
No.
Daddy should be here, but he's not, unfortunately. But one day soon, I hope to have him here with you so you don't have to lay here by yourself.
Deliver me, O God, out of the hands of the wicked, out of the hand of the unrighteous and the cruel man. For you are my hope, O Lord God. You are my trust from my youth. By you I have been upheld from birth. You are he who took me out of my mother's womb. My praise shall be continually of you. Amen.
She's out on bail. And I am a very unhappy camper. I called the sheriff's department, trying to get them to come on down here right then and get something. I was told, you ain't want me to get her first, because when I see her, I'll kill her.
142 is the prisoner's prayer. With my voice to the Lord, I make my supplications. I pour out my complaint before him. I declare before him my trouble. When my spirit was overwhelmed.
They didn't put no restriction on it because they didn't think she could make the bail. Which, that should have been automatically done anyway, but you know, everybody do a mistake. Mom, Daddy, Mama had one that with me.
Deliver me from the persecutors, for they are stronger than I. Bring my soul out of prison, that I may praise your name. For you shall deal bountifully with me. Yes.
I mean, to me, she's a type of serial killer that's out walking free. She made her bond. She's out. And I don't see how it's happened.
It's sad. You know, it's sad to think that this woman could possibly get away with it after all these years.
On the day before I left America, Betty invited me to her home in Augusta, Georgia. Was I really sitting in the house of a serial killer?
As you know, I've been married a few times. And we've had some wonderful times. And there's been a lot of love in our family. My mother and father. This is the picture of my mom and dad. That's where I stemmed from. My first husband, Clarence.
What was he like?
Well, I got married to him right out of high school, and I stayed married to him about 9 months, and then he and I divorced. He was married twice after he and I divorced, and I didn't even know that he was dead until the Stanley County Sheriff told me when this happened to Harold. Then I married Peggy's daddy, and he was a little on the rowdy side too. And he'd be home for maybe 2 or 3 months and take off, and we wouldn't even know where he was at. And he froze to death down on the docks in a truck.
Husband number 2 is James Flynn. She told police that he was found shot to death, and she's told other stories about what happened to him, but we don't know for sure.
So you didn't tell the sheriff's department that he was shot?
No.
Because the journalist claims you did. You've got it wrong, has he?
Who did?
The journalist, Mitch.
Mitch Wise? See, Mitch Wise don't know what he's talking about half the time.
So they've got that wrong?
They've got that wrong.
So what did happen to James?
He froze to death in a truck. He was sleeping in a truck. He was an alcoholic. All of his family knew it.
Husband number 3 supposedly killed himself in 1965 in Florida, but since investigators ruled it a suicide, they destroyed Richard Sills' records.
The strange one to me is your third husband, Richard Sills.
Yeah.
What happened there?
He shot himself.
Peggy said that she heard you having a row, and then she heard a shot.
He wanted to know where his vodka was, and I showed him. And he said yes, and said, somebody's took my gun. I said, oh no. I said, it's right there in the drawer where you always keep it. And he was standing beside the bed, and I was standing at the foot of the bed. He turned around to the dresser and pulled it out, and he shot one time. That was it. One time. So then Harold and I got married. We was together 19 years. Almost 20 years.
Scenarios like this, people say, this Black Widow thing, you've heard
yeah.
all that.
Mm-hmm.
and they do it for the insurance and things. People say those sort of things.
Let me let him in on a clue, honey. I got no insurance from the first one, no insurance from the third one, no insurance from the fourth one. Well, Harold, I got $50,000. But as far as all this money and all this stuff, there wasn't none.
What about the people who say you approached them and said, I want you to kill Harold for me?
They're nuts. I never said I want you to kill Harold. Who says that I did? I didn't approach anybody.
Al Gentry did that.
Well, Al Gentry must have been the one that approached him.
He said that when you arrived at the house after Harold had been shot, he says that the first words you said to him were, I was in Augusta, and that made him suspicious.
You know, I don't know that I even talked to him. And like several others have said, where was he at? He wasn't even around, that I know of. He might have been there, but I sure did not say that. I had had two Valium before I ever got there. Because when I heard it, I was standing in... Maybe I shouldn't be talking about this because it's about the case. But I wasn't, no. Of all the men that I've been around and with, there was only one that did not cheat on me. And that was John. He was a pure gentleman. He would open the doors and hold your arm as you went up the stairs or down the stairs. And he was good. He was good to me. And I was good to him. John was sick for 6 or 7 years. And you know, his son says he didn't know his father was sick. Don't believe that. He's been married 6 times. And, you know, his daddy didn't use women like he has. And I just feel like that that's his problem. He's got a problem.
I've had a history of picking bad spouses, you know what I'm saying? But you know what? All my exes are still alive and they all say something good about me. You know, I don't have no dead ones laying in the graveyard, you know.
Police took John's ashes, didn't they?
Yes, I have them back. I don't know what the big deal was because, you know, if I'd done anything wrong, it'd have been different.
Did John's son, John Jr., did he ever ask you for his father's ashes back?
No.
He said to me he'd like his father's ashes back.
Well, I would have gave them to him, but not now. Not now. Because I will take his ashes and do what he wanted me to with them. He wanted me to put them in the ocean. And when I go down to see his sister, this is his sister, brother, and the mother. When I go down there, we're going to take him down to the ocean and let him go. That's what he wanted.
This is my out. Hadn't been for this shot, I'd have went crazy and blew my head off a long time ago on account of what's going on. Because I have sat down here behind this tree down here several times with a gun in my mouth. Just because of what that bitch had done to my brother. I just hope it's soon over. I wish it was a horse now that I could just step off of it and just walk on off and leave it, but it ain't. Like the sheriff told me, he said, you busted this hornet's nest and you're going to have to stay here and fight the bees with us. So I reckon I have to be here and get that last bee. And that name, that's what we call Betty, B, bitch.
I could not control when somebody died. That's God's work. And if he got ready to take me tonight, I couldn't say no. You know, whenever it's your turn to go, it's your turn. You got to be strong. You got to be strong.
It's a tangled web, isn't it? That's
Yes, it
surrounding
is.
you. Do you get sick of it all?
Yeah, at times. At times, yes. But then I get on my knees. That's the only thing you can do.
Do you bear any animosity towards all these people who are accusing you?
Not really. Because later on, it's going to eat their heart out. The hate and discontent that they're living in now will make them miserable. And it's not going to bother me.
Are you a forgiving sort of person?
You have to forgive. If you're going to heaven, you have to forgive. You don't have to forget, but you do have to forgive.